Hello, nurses, and welcome to the Healthy Nurse Connection. This is a podcast where we talk about all things nursing, whether you're a seasoned nurse, a new nurse, a nursing student, or even thinking about becoming a nurse. This is a podcast for you. We talk about nursing, the hardships, the wins, the goals, and how to live your best nursing life. I'm Leslie Catalone, your host, and this is the Healthy Nurse Connection. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Healthy Nurse Connection podcast. I have a great guest with us today. Her name is Jennifer Thietz, and she has written a book about nursing and burnout and kind of how we can get through and methods to help us get through our burnout or prevent burnout. And so we are going to chat with her today. I'm very excited that she's here and that she's agreed to talk with us. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So hi, Jennifer, welcome.
Hi, Leslie. Yes, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be with you today. Thank you.
Well, I am delighted to have you. So I'm excited to have this conversation. So just to start, I wanted to hear a little bit about your why and why you got into nursing.
So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a nurse. I actually grew up in Africa, in Zimbabwe, and I had an older friend who was considering nursing, and we were childhood friends from the age of 3, 4, 5 up. And she was always talking about nursing and how important it was and the effect that nurses had on the lives of patients. And so I was sort of almost groomed into wanting to be a nurse from those early days. And then at the age of 12, I went to a boarding school, a Dominican convent boarding school in Zimbabwe. Although I wasn't a Catholic, this is where we were sent because we were in the middle of the bush. And during my 5 years as a boarder with the wonderful nuns, I saw what care in action was. And it was really interesting. The nuns weren't just saying, I love you and I want to care for you, particularly to the poor children that they were working with. They were going out there and they were actually helping, they were feeding, they were nursing. So I think that had a big impact on me too, just to see that caring sometimes is not enough. You actually have to go ahead and be that person doing the care.
Sorry. So caring is more of an action. It's like an action that we do to help others. That's a great way to think about it. Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Leslie, it really is. And so I had this sort of background and then went into nursing. The minute I finished school, I immigrated from Zimbabwe, went to South Africa and started my nursing program. And in those days, it was very different from the nursing programs here in the States, in that we were paid, first of all, which is pretty amazing.
Wow.
So we were paid a small amount. We had to stay in nursing homes. So it was difficult. Initially, everybody had to be in a nursing home. Then you could go out and live if you were married and had children, etc., live with your families. But I stayed in the nursing home all the way through. And we worked 40-hour weeks. We were nurse assistants throughout our training. We worked with the higher, students who were first, second, third, fourth year students. And we did blocks of college for 3 months at a time. So we had really, by the time we came out of nursing school in South Africa, we really understood nursing in that we had been at the bedside for those years. So it was great. It was a great, and I love nursing, and it's something that I, not for a second do I ever regret. It was the best choice I ever made.
Yes. Well, great. That's an amazing story.
It was very different in those days. I wish everybody could nurse like that. My daughter is a labor and delivery nurse, and she's been working for 10 years, and she did her training in Sacramento. And I think it's much harder nowadays for student nurses. It was much easier my day.
Yeah, I do believe it's harder in a sense that in order to get your license, you have to pass this test. And so, because I'm also a nursing professor, I feel the stress on my end that we have to teach them all this information as well as teach them the skills. And it is a lot to take in because we want to make sure that they can get licensed once they leave our program.
Right. So I have to say that, I have deep respect for our nurse educators, for you and for your colleagues. And it must be an incredibly difficult job. And you are sitting between the nurse and, well, you're the bridge, aren't you, between the nurse and that new workplace.
Yes.
So your role is incredibly important.
Yes. Well, and that is why this Healthy Nurse Connection podcast is kind of an expansion of that, because we don't always have time to really talk to them about now, how do you deal with all the stresses of being a nurse? So this is kind of a way to have those conversations with other nurses.
Right.
So I am excited to hear about your book and everything that you've written in it. So just give us a little bit of information about why did you decide to write a book? What brought this on, and what would we get from it?
Right. So, Leslie, I've been a registered nurse for over 34 years. As I said, I started when I was 18. So training was 3.5 years. And then I worked for 15 years after that in acute care in South Africa, did a lot of oncology work, did some hospice. And then in 2003, we were very lucky. I managed to get a sponsorship and brought my family to California and worked in a hospital in California and then stayed in the Sacramento area. And I have been pretty much at the bedside for 18 years in California. I left bedside nursing 2 years ago and worked through the COVID pandemic, running a team of nurse navigators, a regional team. So I think having that background, all those years at the bedside, I have a really good understanding of what it is to be a nurse, to work in hospitals, and certainly I'm talking about my experience in California Hospital, which has, by the way, the best nurse ratios, 1-5 patient nurse.
Yes.
And I just became really concerned because I saw so much burnout. I myself went through compassion fatigue and had to leave the bedside 2 years ago because I wasn't bringing my best self to work anymore because I couldn't. So this experience is. And then the last year particularly, I've had the time to sit down, do a lot of research, go through what I feel nurses need to know in the workplace. And so this book has come about. It's called Nurses Matter, and it's something that I'm very proud of.
Yeah, it's amazing. I haven't had a chance to finish all of it, but I started it, and it's really, you do have a lot of great advice in there.
Thank you so much. Lovely.
So you talk about two things that I really want to highlight.
Yes.
One is, we've heard this word burnout, but that we're almost like burned out from hearing the word burnout.
Yes.
And it's not just in nursing, but across all different, areas of, culinary and IT, and like you just hear it like all over the place. But then you also talked about compassion fatigue, which is something that is really unique to just nursing.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about like what the differences of the two are?
Yeah. So you're right. You're right, Leslie. I mean, it's the more research I did over this last year, the more I really saw that compassion fatigue and burnout, they're cousins, they hold hands in our nursing world, but they are not the same. And there are a lot of complex ideas about compassion fatigue. Basically, compassion fatigue comes about when a person in a caring profession, in a caring role, cares for patients for many hours at a time, and then through the process of caring for that person actually experiences secondary trauma or vicarious trauma. So when a person is exposed to hours and hours and hours of suffering, which happens in nursing, a lot, let's face it, in many different specialties, ICU, ER, oncology, med-surg, it can be anyway, even a patient having an outpatient procedure who is suffering a lot post-surgery. So nurses are steeped in suffering, and it does become very wearing because you do absorb some of that. And what's interesting is when you think about it, you think, Leslie, a physician, you talk about burnout with a physician, but you don't often talk about compassion fatigue. And the reason is because most other providers, like physicians, therapists, occupational therapists, whoever they are, they will see a patient for a certain amount of time. If it's a physician, maybe 15 or 30 minutes, depending on the appointment time. Patient comes in, they have a set agenda, they work through that agenda, and the patient then leaves. So the same for occupational therapists or a physical therapist, whoever they are. Nurses are at their bedside with that patient for 8, 10, or 12 hours at a time. We don't get to say, I've had enough. I can't watch this patient suffering any longer. I'm out of here. We don't get to have that privilege. We have to be there. We are the ones who hold the can constantly. And it is exhausting because where do you put what you see at work? When you think about it as nurses, years and years of nurses, and even the newer nurses who are in very stressful wards watching patients suffer, that has to go somewhere in your system, and it does. Yeah. And unfortunately, it results in illness, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, emotional. We become sick carrying other people's suffering.
Yeah, that is so true, because I cannot tell you like how many times we've had like difficult patients where like we have to deal with them for 12 hours. And I don't mean like difficult and like they're just difficult people, but in the sense that they have so much suffering that it's hard for us to deal with them because their anxiety is so high. It's hard to always control, somebody's pain and all those things going on. So that takes a big toll on the nurses. And we have to deal with that for 12 hours instead of just maybe like a 15 or 30-minute session like the doctors do.
Right. Correct.
And then what have you found? Because I have gone through burnout myself a few times. I feel like I've gone through it and I've left the bedside for a while, and then I would go back and then go through it again. And it was kind of like this vicious cycle for me.
Right.
I just kept going back, but then it kept like occurring because I don't think I had the skills or the tools to help prevent it from happening. But anyway, I noticed in the time I kind of went through burnout, it really started to affect me when I had like my own family. So like my husband and my children, and, like you start to put that wall up at your job. But then I noticed like in my home environment, it was where like my husband would have a bad day or he wouldn't feel good. And instead of being the compassionate nurse I would be, it was like so hard to care.
Right.
So have you read or heard anything like how
Yes. So Leslie, when you think that burnout, as you said, can occur in any workplace where there are high stress levels. But I did want to just say, one thing about burnout for nurses, because we do burn out, obviously, and you burnt out and I burnt out, but an empathetic workplace can help mitigate the effects of burnout. So that's an interesting thing that I think organizations have control over, obviously. But it's natural when you're burnt out you just don't have the resources anymore. And when you're in your job, you have to perform a role. And so you're very cognizant. You're in that role. You're performing it. And so you go to work and you do your job. When you come home, you're not in a role anymore. You are yourself. And when you are, they talk about HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And I think nurses are halting a lot, let's face it. You don't have a lunch break, you're hungry. You can be angry because the situation is really tough at work, lonely because you can't connect with your nurses because you're so task-oriented, you're siloed, and tired, you're exhausted. So you come home feeling like that, and you don't have to put on a happy face. You don't have to have this sort of professional role. You can be you, and it's natural that you are going to be sad, angry. All of those emotions are natural. The sad thing about the situation, and I experience that a lot, is you and I are talking about nursing. You can understand burnout perfectly. And I can speak about my burnout and you understand it perfectly because we're nurses and we know what it's like. But our families don't. They have absolutely no idea what we go through. Mm-hmm. So then when a negative side effect or symptom, let's put it this way, symptom of compassion fatigue is that it affects our interpersonal relationships. So that's the first place it goes, because your loved ones and your friends, etc., don't understand you. They're not nurses, unless they're a nurse. They're not nurses. And so they can take it personally. It's that mom comes home tired. I would come home tired and, the kids would want to talk to me. It would be just like, give me 30 minutes. And then the kid thinks, well, or your child thinks, well, now, mom's not really interested in me. She's going to go and do this or that, or your husband or your partner or your child, whoever it is your loved ones. They don't understand. And it's very, very sad. And it's not about them. It's about the nurse. It's about you. And I think educating them. And I would explain and say, look, you're my number one. I'm just exhausted. I've been with patients who are very sick all day and I just need some time alone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. It's so tough.
It's so tough. And Leslie, like you said, what does one do with burnout? So we know that the literature, the research is so evidence-based. It's thick with evidence-based research and data that shows us that self-care, we know self-care is what can help us. But do we do it?
No, we don't.
No. Why? Because we don't have time often.
Yes.
But because it's another commitment. It's another thing from you. I've got so much on my plate.
Yeah.
I've got to go home. I've got to,
Yeah. And so, and this is something that I just had another podcast about, this little mini podcast, but about mini stress events and how we don't, like, we have all these little mini stress events that compound throughout the day. And we really need to be able to counter them with rest and relaxation to kind of bring ourselves down. But when we don't allow that rest or that self-care, then it really affects our bodies like chronically, and we can get into, chronic illnesses. And so for me personally, I have really had to make an effort, and I've done this the past couple of years, to really identify, one, what is self-care? What does that mean to me? Because I think that is different for everybody. And then two, to make that a priority for myself,
right.
Which is not easy.
Which is not easy because we as nurses, we're other-centric. Our lives are around other people, and so to actually think, oh my gosh, I must do something for myself. And you've said you brought up another good point, is you have to prioritize and you have to be fairly consistent.
Yeah.
So I would go through months. I'm a runner. I love running, and it's great. It's a really great stress reducer for me. So I would be out running, but then I would be burning out and I'd be more tired and I'd be sort of more bad-tempered and just not having the time or ability to think about running. And then there would go weeks where I wasn't running, and I would get worse and worse. I would be more and more stressed because that was something that was really important to me, that I loved, that was very good for me, but I wasn't doing it because I was prioritizing other things.
Right.
And so just to try and be consistent with self-care, that is very, very important.
You said another thing too earlier that I want to come back to, but you said an empathetic working place or work environment help with this as well. So what does that mean, and what does that look like?
So yeah, the research shows that. So we're looking at burnout. Our new nurses are burning out. A lot of us older nurses who've been, or more experienced nurses, sometimes you can't understand that this nurse has been a nurse for 3 years and she's burning out. Okay, I've been a nurse for 34 years. So, but the fact is that all those years that I've nursed, I have not been the same as that nurse's 3 years. That nurse has been living in chronic high stress, in a chronically high stressed workplace. And oftentimes, because we don't have the support in our organizations for whatever reasons, we don't have the people around us who can come and help us, mentor us, direct us, listen to us. We know, and again, research is showing it time and time again, if you have an empathetic workplace, if you work with people who are on your team, who are with you, who are supporting you, you will not burn out in the same way as if you are working on your own. And many of us, because we are so busy, we are siloed and we are working on our own. We get our assignment, we've got 100 tasks, we put our heads down and we just get through that 12-hour shift or whatever it is, and then we go home. Yeah. We need somebody to say, hey, I can see you're really battling with that. Can I help you? Maybe a more experienced nurse, etc. To say that.
Yeah.
So Leslie, can I just share with you something that is just profoundly important, and something that I think we can all do, and we can start doing it today?
Yes, that's what I was going to ask you next. What do we do?
What do we do? Okay, so we know about, and many of us know about what we can do for self-care. I knew about diet, I knew about exercise, I knew about rest. But again, like we discussed, it's hard to actually do. But this is something that will make a profound difference to a nurse in their workplace. And this is step number 4, which comes out of my book. But it's step number 4, and it's paying it forward. So we know that there is an enormous amount of bullying that goes on in nursing. And for the life of me, I can't understand it because we are such compassionate people. And I think maybe it's to do with the fact that we are struggling in our workplaces, but there is a lot of bullying and there's a lot of nurse intimidation. Mm-hmm. So paying it forward is probably one of the most important steps that a nurse can do. And the reason is, when you pay it forward, you are not only helping another nurse. So one thinks to yourself, I'm going to pay it forward. I'm going to be kind, and I'm helping Leslie because I'm being kind to Leslie. Yes, I am helping Leslie, and Leslie feels it, and it makes Leslie's day much easier. And Leslie and I have a relationship because I've been kind. When Leslie's kind to me, the same, reciprocal. If I need help and I was kind, and Leslie, and Leslie's there, I can say, Leslie, would you help me? And you're going to help me because we have a relationship. So yes, it helps other people. But this is a great article. It's called 7 Reasons Why You Should Pay It Forward for Your Mental Health. This is data from this article. So first of all, we know helping causes a euphoria, and they call it a helper's high. And this is actually physiologically happening in our bodies, in our hormones, because when we help, we release serotonin, oxytocin, and dopamine. And we're releasing that, and these are feel-good hormones. So you yourself are going to be good when you pay it forward, when you're kind. The kind acts can be as simple as a smile. It's just as simple as a smile. It doesn't have to be a lot of effort. It's maybe just walking past Leslie. I see you're having a tough time. Just giving you a pat, or just saying, hey, Leslie, call me if you need me, or whatever. It doesn't take a lot of time. And then acts of kindness, once we get into the habit of this at work, it actually builds on itself. So our acts of kindness will build on ourselves, and it becomes like a muscle. So you exercise a muscle, the stronger it gets, the more you are kind, the stronger the kind acts become. And then people who are routinely kind, they've done blood tests, and routinely kind people have 25% less stress hormones in their bodies. And we know this. I mean, it makes sense that if you're filled with dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, you haven't got the stress hormones, or as many. Then we know that when we are kind, we like ourselves. So self-worth and self-esteem improve. And that when we pay it forward to another person, we get out of our own heads. So if we're depressed or scared or whatever, we can pay it forward, and then we're not thinking about ourselves. And lastly, random acts of kindness anywhere you are will make you feel a lot better, but they will change the lives of the people around you. So we can start that tomorrow. And It's like putting into a bank account, and then you can withdraw.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I absolutely love that. Well, Jennifer, I'm just going to recap a little bit about what we can do, because we talked about a lot of great things.
Right.
So one, we talked about your book, Nurses Matter, which I would think everybody should go out and get and read, because that has some really great advice in it. But you really bring up we talked about like what burnout is, and burnout is kind of an overused word, but we are feeling it so much in this era of nursing because our work environments are so stressful that we just don't have time to really connect with each other. And that can lead to compassion fatigue because we are chronically taking care of other people, that it wears on us and we absorb that, and it kind of takes hold of us. And it can get to the point where it affects our relationships at home. So if it's getting to that point, we really need to identify that and then really do something to kind of help ourselves, because we have to make ourselves a priority when we're starting to get to burnout and compassion fatigue. So self-care is a big thing, identifying what really is self-care for us, because it's different for everybody. I really love journaling, and I got into journaling. And so I try to make that a priority. And reading, you talked about running and how running is like your thing. So whatever your thing is, identify what it is and make it a priority to do it more often.
Right.
For your self-care. And then your fourth step of pay it forward is another active thing that we can do. So like connecting with other nurses on the unit, being kind to them, because bullying doesn't really help anybody. But I think it might go along with the compassion fatigue, where like, I can't care about you because I can't care about anybody right now. So
exactly.
So we have to still try to practice it, even though we might not feel it. Like you said, the more you practice it, it's kind of like its own little muscle. We have to kind of re-strengthen that muscle. So we need to be kind to each other and do acts of kindness. And when we do that, not only do we feel better, but we get this like helper's high. So we get a dopamine hit.
Right.
That kind of helps us feel better. And then you found that, or in this article you read, that you found that when you do that, you have 25% less of the stress hormone, which is cortisol, in our system, which I think is amazing. And that's just for just practicing that helper paying it forward muscle that we have as nurses, but sometimes we forget how to use it.
Right. Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
So our big takeaway from today is to take these concepts and really think about your own life and how you can do that self, but then think about what you can do to help pay it forward when you are at work with your coworkers, because we're all in together.
Absolutely.
Not one person has it better than anybody else. We're kind of all in this together. So we should really be trying to help each other out.
Yes, that is perfect. And we have the ability to, and we have the expertise and the knowledge to help each other and to tell our organizations what we need. So yeah, that's another very part of self-care.
Because that was the other part too, is that if we have a more empathetic work environment to
Right.
show that they care about us and they really care about how we're being treated, then we have less of the stress overall. So
Exactly.
being advocates for our coworkers and trying to get our leaders, our healthcare leaders, to see that as well is important. So being an advocate for our work environments.
Right.
That is all really great. Is there anything else that you want to add or say?
I think having worked for so many years with nurses and having been surrounded by the angels that nurses are in general, I think we must not ever underestimate ourselves. And it's very important that when we are concerned about something, that we communicate it specifically to our physicians, to our nurse leaders, to our charge nurses, to mentoring nurses, especially for the newer nurses. There too many problems happen in nursing care because we don't, as nurses, have the confidence to step out there and say, stop, I'm concerned about this patient. Please come and see this patient and verbalize, what needs to be done. We know, we're experts. We know we have the power, but just that case of just really having the confidence, because we are the patient's greatest advocate. And if we don't advocate for them, there isn't anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I do feel like we do have power in numbers. So if it's not
absolutely
us saying it, but we're all saying it, then we're more likely to get changes made. Right. And if we have the evidence to back us up, that is also another good thing that will help push our cause.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, where can we find you and where can we find your book?
You can find my book, Nurses Matter, on Amazon with my name, Jennifer Thietz. I'm also out on LinkedIn. I'm having fun on LinkedIn, meeting some amazing people like you, Leslie, and thank you for what you do. We met on LinkedIn, and it's wonderful to see nurse leaders like you that are out there and just doing what it takes to spread the message that nurses do matter, and we will matter until the end of time.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Leslie. Thank you for your time. It was great fun. Thank you.